Hey guys, this is a little introduction to centripetal force. It's always been a really difficult concept for people to do centripetal force. Now, what's the reason why they have so much trouble? I'll tell you. It's because they think centripetal force is a force. Centripetal force is not a force. I wish books were more clear about this. A centripetal force is a nickname for the net force. So F equals ma is still an absolute true statement. All right? So F equals ma, the net force causes the mass to accelerate. If you have an acceleration, it's because there is a net force, So Nick's going to help me demonstrate something and a little bit of a review from previous chapters. Okay? Nick? The world, Nick. Here we go. If Nick is walking this way, and go ahead, walk, and I push him in the same direction as motion, did you see how he accelerated? All right, come on back. So what happened just now? The force, the net force, was in the same direction he was moving, so it made him go faster. Okay? So what did you learn? You accelerate when the net force is in the same direction as motion. Let's try it again, Nick. This time Nick's going to walk forward again, but this time, go ahead, start walking. The net force is backwards. So what happens to his speed? What happens to his speed? If he's walking really, really fast and the net force is negative, or the backwards net force is backwards, he is decelerating, or he's negative accelerating, or the acceleration is the opposite way of where he started. We learned all this from elevators, so everything should be great about that. Here's the new thing, okay? The next chapter has this. Nick, what I want you to do is start over there and walk by me with your arm out. Watch this. So he walks by with his arm out, and now I'm going to pull at a right angle. What happened to Nick because I pulled him at a right angle? I'm pulling inward. Inward. Look what's happened to Nick because I'm pulling him inward. That's right. If I let go, he goes in a straight line over to where the camera is. But, all right, so go over there and run that camera. We'll finish this up. So the point is that Nick went at a circular motion. Okay? Now, in that particular case, what was the force that caused Nick to go in a circle? And the answer is tension. So be aware that there's always a real force causing the mass to accelerate in a circle. There's always a real force doing that. All right? Now, the net force, which is the sum of all the forces, equals the centripetal force. Let me say it again. Centripetal force is a nickname for the net force when the net force makes you turn. I'm going to say that again as if I want you to pause the video and say it again in your mind. The net force causes the mass to turn into a circle. Got it? So, this is how you should be writing it from now on. All right? The net force causes the mass to accelerate. But if it's a circular one, then the net force is a centripetal acceleration. What do we learn about centripetal acceleration? Well, in the books, you'll see that derived, so I'm not going to spend that time doing it now. Just read the book and you'll see where this came from. But it's the speed you're going squared divided by the radius of the curvature that you're going in. So the special acceleration, an acceleration causing a circular motion, is toward the center. Centripetal is Latin. Centripetal is Latin for center seeking, like petals on a flower seek the center. I know it's corny, but it makes me remember it. Okay? Centripetal means toward the center. Here's a force that doesn't exist. It's all made up. Centra means center. Fugal, which means to flee. Get the word fugitive from that. Center fleeing, which means outward. There's no real force making you go outward. It's an illusion. It's pretend. So when you're in your car and you hit the gas pedal, your head goes back. Was there a force making your head go back? No. So did your head go back? No. What do you mean my head didn't go back? It feels like it went backwards. No, your head stayed in the same spot and the rest of your body got accelerated forward and your head has inertia, so it wants to be in the back seat where it used to be. Because now the back seat is now the front seat. So you're accelerating forward. Now there was no force on you then, and you knew that. All right, now you're driving at 30 miles per hour and you hit the brakes. Your head goes forward. No, it doesn't. It's just inertia. Anything in motion wants to remain in motion, so your whole body wants to go forward. Why should you be wearing seatbelts? Because when the car stops when it hits the tree, I want you to stop too. You don't die in the car because your car hit the tree. You get hurt in the car because the car stopped when it hit the tree, and you're still going 45 miles per hour inside of a piece of metal. You do not want to have a collision inside there. You want a belt that stretches and according to the equations in the book, increase the time it takes for you to come to rest. The more time, the less force, because of impulse. We're going to learn that soon. Okay? So you get that idea? That's not magic. That's not like a magic force pulling your head forward. But for some reason, students think there's a magical force pulling them outward when they turn the corner. So if I'm driving in a car, and I got a passenger right over here, and I'm driving in the car, and I turn left, you would swear there was a real force making that person push up against the side door. It's an illusion. Think about what would really happen if the door popped off, and I didn't like the kids, so I unhooked the seatbelts. All right? Then I'm driving along, I turn left, kid flies out of the car, and it looks like he flew out, but if you really look from a bird's eye point of view, you got a little drone above looking at it, you would see that that kid went in a straight line down the original street, and I'm the one that turned. So from my frame of reference, it looks like he flew out, but actually from real life frame of reference, he just went in a straight line because there was no net force on him, and anything in motion wants to remain in motion in a straight line. See how this works? So if you write down F equals ma like you should, then you got to realize that the nickname for that net force, when the mass causes it to accelerate in a circle, then that net force has a nickname called centripetal force. And again, I wish books were more clear about that. It doesn't mean that a force is a centripetal force. The centripetal force is the sum of all the forces acting on the mass. Get it? So, let me give you an example. What is the real force that's causing the Earth to go around the sun instead of in a straight line? And the answer is centripetal force. No! That's the net force that doesn't show up on a free body diagram ever. The net force never shows up on a free body diagram. That's like step 4. Okay? What's the force? And the answer is, gravity. Alright, so if there's only one force, then it is the net force. Right? You know how to sum up the forces when there's one of them. That was easy. Okay? What about a car driving around a turn? What's the force not letting the car go in a straight line? Well, in the wintertime, you'll know what the force is, because if it's not there, you suddenly realize, oh, I'm going in a straight line. The answer is friction. You get rid of friction, the car just goes in a straight line, no matter what you do with the wheels. You put it on like black ice, you just keep on going in a straight line. You might spin a little, but you're going in the original plan. You know, turning the wheel's not going to do a thing without friction. So friction's pulling inward. Friction's pulling inward. If that's the only force, it's the net force. But that's step 4, man. On the free body diagram, what are you going to draw as your arrow pointing inward? Friction. Centripetal force never shows up on a free body diagram. Only the real forces show up on a free body diagram. And if you draw an arrow outward, we kick you out of physics class. Because there is no outward force, it's fake. Centripetal force is an illusion based on your frame of reference. It feels like you're getting pulled outward, but you're not. You want to just go in a straight line, and the dude's turning. Okay? What's the centripetal force for that demonstration we just did with Nick? The answer was tension. I was pulling inward. You're doing a lab with that string with a mass on the end, and you're pulling it, that's tension pulling inward. Tension's pulling inward. And we used washers to pull so that the tension equaled the weight of the washers. So it was the washers that was the net force. And because it was only one force, because we ignored friction, it was the centripetal force. But there's a scene from Batman, the original movie, before they got really good with Chris Nolan, and it was Michael Keaton, and the Joker was Jack Nicholson. This dude was getting chased by the Joker. He realized he was going too fast to go around the turn with friction alone. So mu normal was not big enough. Mu times normal was friction. Friction was the centripetal force. Friction was the net force. He didn't have enough. He was going too fast for that turn. So what did he do? He shot a cable out the side of his car. It wrapped around a light post. And then the Batmobile went around the turn, but the Joker's men went in a straight line tangent. And he got away from the guys. It's a great scene. It didn't happen in real life. Just ask Mythbusters. It was impossible. But it's really fun for the movies. He tapped it around. There was tension plus friction. You get that? tension plus friction, it was tension plus friction equals the centripetal force. Centripetal force is a nickname for the sum. And that equaled mv squared over r. And because he had both of these going, he turned the corner. Joker's men only had friction. They were going too fast to turn because mu was low that day because it was raining out. All right? So if it's raining out, either use a cable, or in your book there is a bank turn. Then it's friction and a little piece of the normal force. You go around a bank turn, it's your car, the wall is pushing you inward. Okay? So try some of those bank turn questions. It's really kind of cool to see that going. Okay? So I wanted to give this as an introduction to centripetal force because I need for you to understand that this concept is the net force causes the mass to accelerate. So the net force is the centripetal force. So now when you read the book, keep that in the back of your mind every time. The net force causes the mass to accelerate, and there's a nickname for the net force when the net force makes you go in a circular motion. Okay? The faster you go, let's analyze that equation. The net force causes the mass to accelerate. For your lab, that net force is going to be the tension, because we're going to ignore the friction of that little pipe. So it's the tension, which also happens to be the mass of the washers times 9.8, and that ends up equaling mv squared over r. Okay? And then if you graph the mass of the weight of the washers on the y-axis and v on the x, you're not going to get a straight line. But if you graph the weight of the washers versus v squared, then you get a straight line. Think about what the slope of that line is going to be. What did you keep constant in the equation? What does the slope of that line represent? That will give you the accepted value for your lab. Okay, so hopefully that helped, give you a little introduction. If you kind of got lost, if you already did that lab, this will kind of help you for a good review for the test so you don't get fooled by some of the questions on the test. You understand truly the concept of centripetal force versus centrifugal fake forces. All right, so go ahead, read the book.